this module, we're going to look at salt and water concentrations in blood. So salt and water balance in the bloodstream, you're going to be learning about. There's osmoreceptors, antidiuretic hormone, the aldosterone hormone, and we have a look at how these different hormones affect our volume of blood. So to maintain the water concentration in our blood, you must drink about 2 litres of water every day. Now, if you don't feel like you drink 2 litres of water, you may actually be getting your water in soft drinks or coffee or tea, or you might be getting it in your foods. So foods that are high in water include watermelon, zucchini, and cucumbers, and most fruits and vegetables. So even though you might get a fruit, for example, a strawberry or banana, they might not have as much water as these, but they still do have water, especially lettuce and other fruits and vegetables. So that's why fruit and vegetables are extremely important for your body, because we actually do get water from those sources as well. We lose 2 litres of water per day through perspiration, urine, exhaled air, and exercise. So you may not realize it, but you might perspire during the day, or you might be excreting lots of urine, and you have exhaled air. So within your air, you actually have water droplets. And you know this because when you're cold, you might breathe into your clothes, and that you can actually feel that your clothes are actually warm and moist. And that after you breathe into it, it's because there's air in your breath as well, and also daily exercise. A drop in fluid intake will cause thirst. A drop in fluid beyond 10% of body mass can actually cause death. It can actually go the other way as well. If you do drink too much fluids, you're actually drowning your cells and they can start to die. So that's why we need a balance, and this comes back to homeostasis. You need a balance of water within your body that's not too much and not too little. Now, salts. The question here is, do we eat less salt? We've been told by, heaps of media that, we have too much salt in our diets. Yes, there are some salty foods, and yes, we can overconsume salt in our diets, but we do actually need some salt in our diets. A decrease in the concentration of sodium ions in the bloodstream leads to a decrease in blood volume. Now, this can actually have negative symptoms, and some include fatigue, nausea, thirst, and feeling faint. If you're a person that naturally has low blood pressure, it actually means that if you feel like you're faint every time, if you sit down and if you stand up quickly, and if all of a sudden you get this wave of black, you might not be able to see and you feel faint, that's because you've got low blood pressure. And doctors will actually tell you should increase your consumption of electrolytes and salts, because you need salt in your body to retain more water. What's actually happening if you're sitting down or low is the blood might actually pull to the bottom of your body. And when it does that, there's not enough blood in your brain, which is why you tend to black out. It's your body's way of putting you back down, laying you back down, so that blood can go around your body. So when salt decreases, why does water decrease? So when you eat salty foods, what do you feel like doing afterwards? Most people would actually say that you feel thirsty and you want to drink. This is to even out the salt and water balance. So your body's actually doing it naturally, and behaviorally you feel like water after consuming some salt. Water is drawn to salt. When you consume more salt in your body, water is drawn to that salt. So if you don't have enough water in your body and you do have some salts, what you will actually do is in your kidneys, you'll actually take in those salts, keep the salts on purpose, because with salt, it draws water to it. When you're drawing water to the salt, it means that you can retain the water in your body. Water is really good solvent, which means it likes to dissolve substances like salt. Water is attracted to salt. So when there is a high salt concentration in the body from foods, you will also experience more water retention. When there are more salts present in the bloodstream, there will also be a higher amount of water retention. And this is why in some diets, a tactic is they cut out salt completely. When you cut out salt from your diet, you're going to have less salt in your body. Because of that, there's going to be less water retention because water is drawn to salt. So if you have less salt in your diet all of a sudden, you excrete the salts and you will excrete the excess water. But the weight that you're losing is only water from your body, which you need. It's not actually fat loss. So this is not a healthy way to lose weight, as water is needed in the body, and it's also, you need salt in moderation. An osmoreceptor is a sensory receptor primarily found in the hypothalamus of most endothermic organisms that detect changes in osmotic pressure. Osmoreceptors detect changes in the blood, water, and salt concentrations in the body cells and tissues. The hypothalamus detects in the blood a decreased amount of water by an increase in blood concentration, so your blood is actually thicker. When we become dehydrated by decreasing water intake or increasing water loss, water is lost from our bloodstream. This increases its osmotic pressure and the cells become hypertonic. Now notice here the spelling of this. It's hyper, meaning that there's not enough water. So on this side of the diagram, you may be able to see that the cells are actually shriveled up. They're red blood cells. When placed in a hypertonic solution, these cells it's in a salty solution. So the cells take in lots of salt and there's not much water there. That's the problem with hypertonic. Now, our aim for our red blood cells, or all cells in our body, is to actually have a balance, and this balance is called isotonic. So when cells are hypertonic, it's when there's an even amount of salts and water within the cells, and they're actually quite happy. If salt is inside the cell, water will follow. We aim for our cells to have this isotonic balance, an equal amount of water on each side of the cells so that their cells are nourished but not over full. Now, in the opposite, if we do consume too much water, it can be detrimental to our body as it puts the cells under stress. And what it actually does, as you can see here, the hypertonic solution, the cells actually start to increase in size. When they increase to a certain size, they can't handle it anymore, and they don't have a cell wall for protection, so these cells tend to burst. If these were animal cells, plant cells for example, it would have a cell wall for extra protection. But these animal cells do not have that cell wall. They only have a cell membrane. So when there's too much water and not enough salt, these cells will expand and burst. When under this amount of pressure, cells can burst and therefore they're dying. Kidneys. So when we become dehydrated by sweating, for example, it causes the blood to be more concentrated or thicker, which pulls water into the blood from the cells as the osmotic pressure has increased. The cells of the hypothalamus will shrink. When it does this, the hypothalamus sends a message to your pituitary gland to release more antidiuretic hormone into the blood. Now, diuretics such as coffee, Coke, or tea makes you go and urinate. The antidiuretic hormone is anti, so it doesn't make you urinate. In fact, it does the opposite. It helps you retrieve water from the kidneys. The hypothalamus also sends a message to make you feel thirsty, so you actually feel like drinking when you're dehydrated. Drinking water is a behavioral response that decreases osmotic pressure. Adjustments to the concentration of water and salts within the urine takes place mainly in the distal parts of the kidney tubules and the collecting tubules by alterations to its permeability of the membranes of cells lining the nephron walls. So you can see here, this is a nephron within a kidney, and over here you've got the glomerulus. Now there is actually where the blood is being pushed into these tubules here. Now, when the blood's pushed, all the blood and proteins are kept within the blood vessels, but all of the wastes, water, sugars, are actually pushed into, this is called the proximal tubule part here. In the proximal tubule, the glucose is actually retrieved back in your blood. But within this whole process, and you can see here the loop of Henle, and there's the distal tubule, which is this tubule here, it goes to the collecting duct. In this part, so the loop of Henle and the distal tubule and the collecting duct, this is where the water and salts keep being pulled and pushed into each other to be reabsorbed back into the blood. So if you've been drinking lots of water, you don't need to reabsorb as much water in the blood, and your urine is more dilute. But if you don't have enough water, more water is pulled back at these stages in the kidney, and your urine will be more concentrated. This is what it means by alterations to the permeability of the membranes. Permeability means how much can it breathe, how much is let back in. So permeability is very important in the kidneys in particular. To learn more about the kidney, view the kidney videos. So the changes in permeability are brought about by two hormones. I've got a rock here that you can see, and we're pouring water, and all those little rocks are joined together. But you can see that the water is actually making its way through. That means that it's permeable. So if something is not permeable, it means that it won't move through. And this is a good example of the kidney, because they become more permeable to let water and salt move through these vessels. Now, the two hormones that are involved in this permeability, the first one is aldosterone, which brings about retention of salts in the body. And the second one is the antidiuretic hormone, which brings about water reabsorption or conservation within the body. So both water and the salts work together to get the balance within your body. Now, when a mammal begins to dehydrate, blood volume drops, and this is detected in the hypothalamus of the brain. It stimulates the pituitary gland to release the hormone, antidiuretic hormone, which acts on the nephrons on the kidney to increase the reabsorption of water. The antidiuretic hormone works by making the kidneys more permeable to water. This means the kidneys allow more water to be reabsorbed in the body. When water levels are restored, there is less antidiuretic hormone produced. So it's still produced, but just in a smaller amount, meaning less water is reabsorbed by the kidneys. Aldosterone, which is salt regulation, is a steroid hormone secreted by the cortex of the adrenal gland. Its function is to regulate the transfer of sodium and potassium ions in the kidney. A decrease in the concentration of sodium ions in the bloodstream leads to a decrease of blood volume, and this stimulates cells in the cortex of the adrenal gland above the kidney to secrete the hormone aldosterone. If sodium ions are lower than normal concentration in the blood, less sodium is excreted in the urine as these ions are moved from the nephron into the surrounding capillaries by active transport. So the difference between salt and water retention, water is actually drawn in with the salt, and it's a passive transport, which means that it does not require energy. For this process to happen, aldosterone actually actively makes you bring back salt, and by active transport, it means that it requires energy from your body. As water is attracted to sodium, it also moves as a result. This increases the blood volume and so maintains blood pressure as well as the sodium ion levels of the body fluids. An increase in aldosterone increases the reabsorption of sodium ions or potassium ions in the loop of Henle and the distal tubules of the nephron, which you can see here. We have the proximal tubule, the loop of Henle, the distal tubule, and the collecting duct. An antidiuretic hormone for water regulation, ADH, it's also known as vasopressin, controls water reabsorption in the nephron. When the levels of the fluid in the blood drop, the hypothalamus causes the pituitary to release the antidiuretic hormone. The hypothalamus makes antidiuretic hormone, but it is stored and released from the pituitary gland. This increases the permeability of the collecting ducts to water, allowing more water to be reabsorbed from the urine into the blood. Now, this is how your urine should look. On this side, number 1 and number 2, your urine should actually be quite clear. If it looks like number 3 or number 4, that's actually showing you signs of dehydration. If it looks like number 5 or number 6, so if it's more of orange in colour, it's severe dehydration. There's only one way that it's not severe dehydration, and that's if you notice if you take a multivitamin tablet in the morning, you might find that within a couple of hours when you go to the toilet, your urine is more coloured. The reason why is because your body is getting rid of the excess vitamins from that tablet. So if you do take a multivitamin tablet and your urine is more coloured, that may just be because of the tablet that you have taken. This does mean that your body does not need those excess vitamins because it's getting rid of it. So sometimes multivitamin tablets, a lot of it is wasted, and it makes your kidneys work overtime to get rid of it. There, of course, are some things that you need in your blood or your body. So if you have iron deficiency, you may need to take iron tablets to keep up with that deficiency in your body. So the resulting urine is more concentrated since it contains less water but the same amount of urea, wastes. So urea is wastes. In birds, it's called uric acid, and in fish, it's called ammonia. All three things are actually just a type of waste. We excrete urea, we convert ammonia to urea on purpose because ammonia is extremely toxic to be held in the body, whereas urea can be held for a couple of hours, so we can actually hold it in our bladder and not go to the toilet for a couple of hours. Fish excrete ammonia because they can excrete it straight away in their environment, so they don't need to rush to the toilet, they can just excrete it and it's easily excreted. Our body converts it to urea to be safer. Once the osmotic pressure decreases, the hypothalamus cells swell and the pituitary glands release of antidiuretic hormone. When there is too much fluid in the blood, sensors in the heart cause the hypothalamus to reduce the production of antidiuretic hormone in the pituitary, decreasing the amount of water reabsorbed in the kidney. When there is too much fluid in the blood, sensors in the heart cause the hypothalamus to reduce the production of antidiuretic hormone in the pituitary, decreasing the amount of water reabsorbed in the kidney. This results in a lower blood volume and larger quantities of more dilute urine. This is a feedback system which regulates body water levels in response to water intake and loss, so it's another homeostatic response. Now, this is a quiz question and answers that you should try at home. What, in general, do the antidiuretic hormone and aldosterone do? The antidiuretic hormone control and regulate the reabsorption of water, blood pressure, and volume. Aldosterone regulates the salt concentrations in the body, and you do need to know the difference between both. Which gland makes antidiuretic hormone? The gland it's the hypothalamus that makes it. Which gland stores and releases the antidiuretic hormone? The pituitary gland. Number 4, which gland makes aldosterone? It's the adrenal glands, and they sit right above the kidneys. Number 5, what does HRT stand for, and what is it? HRT stands for hormone replacement therapy, and it's when a person is deficient in a hormone and they receive treatments to rectify the imbalance. Either the adrenal or pituitary glands are not releasing the hormone, and we go this into more depth in the next video. Copy and complete the following sentence. If a diuretic increases the volume of urine, then more water is removed from the body. So, an antidiuretic, what does it do? An antidiuretic decreases the volume of urine so that less water is removed from the body. In question 7, complete your own flowchart of the feedback mechanism for antidiuretic hormone by converting the information above into a figure 8. So you're going to be converting into a feedback system. And you can do this referring back to the homeostasis videos and the feedback models for homeostasis. It should be a figure 8 where you have a balance, and from that balance you move to the stimuli and the receptors and so on. Your figure 8 should look something like this, where you've got a balanced line, and when you've got water, the stimulus is water concentration decreases in blood. This actually makes your blood more thicker, and the osmoreceptors in the hypothalamus detect this change. It goes up to the brain, which is the control center. So the message is sent to the brain, and the pituitary gland releases the antidiuretic hormone. As it sends a message to the effector, and the effector has increased antidiuretic hormone released, and the response is that the kidneys increase water uptake. The urine will be more concentrated. Now, if this was to go into reverse, so from the balance, the water concentration increases in the blood. Your receptors, so the ozma receptors in the hypothalamus, detect the change. In the control center, the pituitary gland releases the antidiuretic hormone, and the effector is that less antidiuretic hormone is released. As a response of this, there's less uptake of water, there's decreased water concentration in blood, and urine is less concentrated, so your urine looks more clear. In summary, it is important for the blood to have a good salt-water balance. Too much or too little of either can be harmful for your body. The hormones aldosterone and antidiuretic hormone are important to balance salt and water concentration. Hormone replacement therapy is a treatment for people who do not have this balance, and we'll look at that more in depth in the next video.